rapport while we're working on this anyway. Now you're upside down.
Here.
Yeah, you
Oh,
go.
wait, you did it. Okay.
That's
We could
you
see
may
your
think this was on purpose.
your face and everything. Great.
Fantastic.
All right. So now you
here I
don't,
am.
that's actually good because now you don't have to be distracted by anything. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself while I
Yes.
do a couple other settings, and then we'll probably start in about 5 minutes.
Yes, excellent. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I don't know much, but it doesn't matter in this context. However, I do quite a lot regarding other things, and I think that might be good enough for this setting.
Sure.
I'm Christina. I'm born on the Swedish countryside. I'm born on a farm, and we have had this farm since many generations back. So I told myself quite early in life that whatever happens, even though I go global, which I have done, so to say, this will always be a home. And I think I take that into account to some kind of philosophy that I am living. I'm close to the nature, I'm close to animals, but at the same time, I've managed to achieve things that people find interesting. So,
quick question. Are you in Europe now or New York? Because it sounds like you're back and forth.
Oh, Sweden.
Okay.
Europe, the north, Scandinavia.
Sure.
It's
getting carry on. This is interesting. We'll get into it a little bit more in a few minutes. But yeah, carry on. I was just wanting to clarify.
So I felt when I was approximately a little bit more than 20 years old that I had capacities, skills that I think every person's have, but I noticed them. Patience, for instance, a capability to reflect and to finish what I've started. So I decided to do something about that. But at that time, I didn't know much. What can I do about these inner strength or feelings or whatever we call them? I simply decided to become best in the world at something. And I picked shooting, precision shooting. It's a very boring sport. But anyway, to put the story further ahead, I spent a large amount of time staring at a target, at a small dot 50 meters away, practiced precision and concentration. And after quite few years, approximately 7.5 years, I did step up on a world champion podium. So I got the world champion title. And I combined this journey by being a military officer, which people find like interesting, typically. Former military female officer and world champion in precision shooting. So that's cool. But what's interesting is, what did I do afterwards? What do I do with this platform that I have? What do I do with the level that I have achieved? I saw when I left the sports and the military arenas that I met other worlds, like the business world and also the academic worlds, but let's say other worlds than sports and military. I saw that, hey, people have lost something. And I clarified to myself that, hey, I'm coming from a world or worlds where focus was elevated and was respected as a necessary ability. And I step into a world where short-term attitude, quick fix, fragmentation, attention addiction, and time poverty is the norm. And then I decided to do something. So I wrote a book and I developed this knowledge. I created a concept around focus and the importance of focus for the individual, but also for the society at large. And then I've not gone viral. I could have done that. Everybody told me this, to become another guru. And maybe I am. There are 1 million views, etc. at the TED Talk. But otherwise, I've decided the opposite, that to stay focused myself. I don't want to be seen everywhere all the time by as many people as possible. So I've kept it quite exclusive, if I'm allowed to say so. and I have given it the time it has needed. And I don't think the world need more gurus, maybe.
Yeah.
So instead of becoming, a guru out on the internet, I'm staying in the forest and I'm building a global brand. Yet not yet officially launched, but a global brand where I bring in, thought leadership, explaining to the world that I believe this is an innate skill. The skill of focus is something we need to protect in this intense world. At the same time as that concept is connected to interdisciplinary research, and that will then be put also to a commercial opportunity so that more people can learn from this, but not only then from one woman,
Right.
not only from a female officer and world champion. So I'm probably a bit of a game changer, but on a very humble way. And I take it easy, I take it slow. I have a son who is autistic. He's 10 years old now. My father is very old. He got me quite late. He's 93.
Wow.
So I'm spending my time in between very young and very old. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
need to do that to support, the family at the same time as I have this deep interest. And people have called me the focus icon and the focus goddess. And I don't think that is because I know more. I think it's because I act in a focused way. And if that's because of the fact that I've practiced this so much, or because I've read so much about it, or because I find it so important and see it everywhere, or if it's just an appearance or a will from other people around us, because I can see the lack of focus as a universal macro trend almost, if you see what I mean. I think we can conclude by me just being an ordinary mother, but at the same time quite sharp and having great visions that needs collaborations as well. So I'm glad to be here with you.
Well, yeah, we're really glad to have you. So
very impressive what you've done up to now.
Thank you, Ronald.
No, I'm very impressed and very interested by your idea of focus. And I had another idea these last days, and you inspire me to ask you a question. My idea, reflecting on life and on how we choose to do things or not or not do them. I think many people have one basic idea from the moment they are born, or from when they are very young, and this idea is not materialized. It's not embedded in something. It's there, and it takes a lot of time to discover what it is. And when you look backwards, you see, wow, I did those steps who are aligned, and the moment I did them, I didn't realize they were aligned. It's only looking backwards that I can see there's a straight line. And I know in my case, what guided me my whole life is something related to Gödel's theorem, but it hasn't got to be mathematics. It's the fact that anything that is structured, this pre-decided, is not complete, is lacking something. And when I look backwards, I see that that's the idea who has matured my whole life, and that I have tried to apply doing maths, but also playing ping pong, or my relationship with the tax office or whatever. So I was wondering if you considered your idea on concentrating on focus was a final result, or is there something deeper that will spread in other directions in the future? What do you think?
Well, let me, if you can hold that thought, and Christina, hold your answer to it, because I'll just like, this is a great way to like segue and introduce people. So, and if you need him to reiterate in a minute, that's fine too. So let me just, we'll just kind of dig. That's a great kind of opener. So I'll just say this, welcome to the podcast that we're now more officially recording. We talked for a few minutes leading up to this recording. Some of it may or may not be published in various ways. And I had to step away for a minute to check on my dog, etc. Now that we've got the recording all set up, everything's good. And this was really interesting. We had, by the way, a friend who's a mutual friend to the three of us, named Hazel. And I think she had some things come up with her fostering and other responsibilities that she's not going to be able to join us, unfortunately. We'll probably do a future one with her and maybe Christina, who we're about to talk to, and possibly Ronald later this summer. But we'll talk about that in the future. But this one, we'll go for, it'll probably be roughly an hour recording, give or take. And that's in ways to welcome anyone who's going to listen on the recording that's going to be released here over the next couple of weeks. This is, by the way, for anyone who might be curious, we're recording on May 9th, which is interesting because, by the way, Christina, to clarify, you're in Scandinavia. Is it a little after 9 p.m. there, or are you in a different time zone?
No, it's a little bit after 9 o'clock. It's
okay.
Getting a bit darker, but it's fine.
That's interesting. You're on same time zone as Ronald Cicurel here, who's joining us from Switzerland. And on that note, while I stepped away to check on my dog and things, Dr. Ronald Cicurel asked a very interesting question to Christina. Maybe this is a good way to kind of segue into things, since he's been here on 2 or 3 recorded conversations we've had in the past, and he can just maybe reiterate that question a little, and then Christina can answer it, and we'll go from there. Yeah, Dr. Ronald, if you want to maybe kind of reiterate the question succinctly for Christina.
I don't know if I'll hit it in the same form, but never mind. Because I was very impressed by what Christina said on her biography and her career. Yeah. And I was myself reflecting on my own past life, and thinking that with taking some distance, there's one, or let's say very few ideas, basic ideas at the bottom of the personality, who have been there without me even noticing, and who have, after all, guided my whole life. And I thought that in my case, probably it was something turning around Gödel's theorem, Gödel's completeness theorem, but it could be applied in any different subjects, in business, in sports, in mathematics, obviously also. And my question was, because of what Christina did and how she found how she decided to focus her attention and her career on focus. Is focus this big idea of hers, or will it still mature and change and transform? That was half my question.
Very good. Yeah, Christina, go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, excellent. I had quite many minutes now to reflect.
There you go.
So I will probably come up with a well thought through answer. And what I've been thinking during these minutes is that, yes, I believe, Ronald, you're right. I reflected in a similar way. If we go back in time to where I like I said in this introduction, that I decided one day to become best in the world at something. And then I said it happened to be precision shooting. That means that it wasn't important for me in which sport. That's one thing I was thinking about. It was just a feeling. It was just some kind of guideline which told me and gave me the self-confidence to dare to do it, and to dare to also reach all those mistakes that you have to reach before you step up on a podium. And then also when having been up on the podium, and I can honestly say, actually, even before I became this world champion that everyone think is so amazing, I knew deep inside, and I think this is where we can connect to your question, Ronald, that there was definitely a deeper meaning, a deeper, much deeper dimension than simply becoming best in the world. This is why I have in my way of thinking that competing in that sense, in the way trying to become better than others, that's sometimes it actually feels old-fashioned in a way, because I know there is so much more into it, where the gold medal is not really that important as people may think. And then if we look ahead, me finding the importance of focusing on focus and wanting to share this to people, and that probably is, to be honest, just a word. I know what focus is. I enjoy to explain what it is, but of course, I explain it in a broader perspective than simply trying to become more productive or more efficient or even to peak perform, because I want us to reflect upon what is it beyond all that, and in what way can our ability to focus our attention and to stay on target and to dig deeper into our core values, into our inner self, what can that do with an individual, and what can that do with a society, which actually brings us to a deeper words than focus, which I would say maybe, and let's see if Ronald reflect upon this, respect, respect for the humans, I would even like to use the word love between people and the whole system that we are in. But that might be too early to already use those words.
That's
But
all right.
I'm quite sure you understand what I mean, that yes, I agree. There is something much deeper than what we simply choose to, so to say, focus on. There is probably a much deeper focus connected to what we happen to turn out to be. And it never stops, I think. There's an ongoing process. There is always a target ahead. We may not even need to reach it, but we enjoy to stop and reflect and to have the understanding of the fact that there might be something deeper than all this that is going around, especially what's going around sometimes on internet, you know, all this irrelevance that we need to resist. Do you see what I mean, Ronald?
Yeah. I think it goes beyond psychology. It's something that is it's not something that explains because of our psychology what we are doing. It's beyond psychology. It's like if it was pre-given, and I have this idea for a few weeks now, and the more I think about it and more I look at lives, I believe that many people should ask themselves, I've done all that. I justify all I do by stupid arguments, by or by psychology or whatever. But if I think of it from a distant point of view, those justifications are not sufficient. They explain local events, but they don't explain the trajectory, global trajectory. And I was always surprised by how diverse we can be. We can do so many different things, and but behind the different things we do, there's something common. Behind or inside the different things we do, there's something common, and I think that's intriguing.
Let me maybe see if I can dial this down to something that's been interesting that I've been thinking about recently, just because I've been doing my own like midlife back to school thing at the same time as some other obligations, helping with my father, for example. And a question, or maybe one of these recurring questions for humanity is like, what is the human condition? Some look at the human condition as I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, but people look at humans inherently evil, and some look at them inherently good. My position, at least at this point, is that what makes humans special, maybe for lack of a better word, is our ability to choose to be good or choose to be evil. However, this is how I say it kind of relates to what you guys are on recently here, is that I know it gets into this some deep philosophical quandary like determinism and free will and those kind of things. So I'm wondering if the two of you, in whichever order you'd like, would like to say if the human condition is one that we individuals have a level of control over, and if so, to what degree, and perhaps is that a real level of control, or is it only an illusion or delusion? Either one of you want to take a crack at this deep philosophical question as we get through some tough questions here. Yeah, go ahead, Christina. It looks like you're chomping at the bit here.
Yes, yes. Well, I feel like posing another question.
Sure.
Perhaps not directly back to you, but to the to everyone who's listening,
The discussion,
and also
sure.
to myself as well.
Sure.
That how can we know if we are in control or not? That's one interesting question that I was just thinking about. When do we know if we do this in a controlled way or in a not controlled way? Who makes that choice, so to say? Who takes that decision? But I also think that, like you said, there is probably a willpower within most of us, I feel like saying, without knowing everyone on Earth. Yeah. And of course, there's a positive way of thinking within inside of me as well, but this willpower of doing good. I mean, this is often what we say to children, you know, they do something which we call bad, and we try to help them to understand that was mean, that was a bad behavior. And already there we have set up some frameworks of what's good and bad. And then, you know, we teach the children to do more good and to do less bad. But I also think that the doing good or the doing bad, if we move that towards a collective understanding of what is good, I think it requires time. So I wish to throw in the word time into this conversation, because what I have seen, and I might be wrong, I have not seen every person, I have not seen the whole world, but through my eyes and my understanding, things are moving so fast now, and people are getting more or less addicted, some of them, to instant, you know, gratification and instant, you know, content from social media, etc. And I'm wondering what's happening
Hmm.
within their mind setting when they do not may have the time needed to reflect deeply and to go less superficial into their own thinking, so to say, because I believe that developing a mindset towards taking decisions to do good, it requires firstly to understand what is good and what is bad, and that takes time. And it also then requires to think a few seconds before you react, before you say something mean, before you respond, before you write something on social media, for instance. It also requires time. And time is exactly what so many people do not have in these days.
Dr. Ronald, go ahead. I'm really interested on your take on this quandary here.
Are you speaking to me here?
Yeah. I mean, just your response to this discussion as a whole, in particular, what Christina was saying and the question that I sort of posed to the discussion. Go ahead, Dr. Cicurel.
Well, I would have a lot to say on your question, as you know, but just one thing for Christina is there are obviously things that you cannot know by spending 5 seconds or 10 seconds or 1 minute on them and then passing to something else. There are a lot of things that take a lot of time. I mean, months and years. And normally when you have, in mathematics, if you have a good idea, the good idea comes in a fraction of a second, but then to structure it and to prove it and to make it understandable by other people, it can take years. It can take all your life. So you need to really concentrate on the same idea, and you sometimes for days without eating, without doing anything else, but focusing on your idea. And it's only by this, it's a sort of deep movement inside you, and suddenly, after a long time, something appears. But it takes a long time. So I'm very afraid by what I see. And I read the other day in a Swiss newspaper that the attention span had lowered by 50% in the last 20 years. I think it was 14 seconds, and now it's down to 7 seconds or something like that. And I think that's, we must work on that subject.
Yes.
And I'm whatever you do, Christina, I'm glad to support you. Now to come back to Isaac's question on good and bad.
Complex stuff. You
know that I believe that reality is something that is generated by our brain. What is out there, we can't know it. We can't at all know it. It's not solipsism. It's simply we have no way to collect from out there other thing than data. Collect data, but the points connecting these data, that means the theory, it's generated by our brain. That's because of how our brain works. We can, any representation, that means any image we have from something who comes from outside, is always connected to some feeling. You can't dissociate something from a feeling. When you see a color red, I see the same thing outside as you, but my feeling is different, and I appreciate it in a different way. Some people will find this curry very hot, and I'll find it not hot at all. It's the same. So feelings are everywhere. And imagine that we have language only for the last 20,000 years, roughly. Before that, there was no language. I don't know if it's 25,000, 15,000, but it's around 2,000 years that we have a structured language.
Yeah.
Before there were probably sounds and words, but not common to everybody and not structured in sentences. Before that, everything was expressed at the first person. There was no third person. What language creates, language is the first stage of digitalization. It's because we have a common word about this glass that we call it a glass, and we think we see the same thing. We don't know if we see the same thing. There's no way to know. I can measure this and say the diameter is 5 centimeters. We will all agree on the 5 centimeters and believe we are seeing the same glass. But it cannot be the case, because we all associate feelings to it, and our feelings depend on our history, on so many things that we can't say that we see exactly the same thing. I'm not speaking about optical or auditory illusion. Illusion, we can spot them out on by creating a consensus. But there are things that we cannot spot out because every one of us is a human being. We have the same brain. We have the same physiology. So it's common. If I eat something with a lot of salt, or if I eat an ACL, I'll find it salty. But there's nothing salty in the sodium or the chloride that composes this molecule. I make it salty. And if I had another type of brain, and probably every human being would say it's salty. But if I was an alien with another type of brain, I wouldn't call that salty, and it wouldn't be salty. So 20,000 years ago, we have established a common language, and we gave existence to think independently of us. This glass exists independently of me, and it continues to exist if I'm not looking at it. But that's what I believe. But it's a big problem of quantum physics. What happens between two measurements? Nobody knows. It's an open question. We know what happens, what is there when I measure, but I cannot know what is there when I don't measure. So I'm not saying that I'm saying that the glass does not exist as glass. There's something there. With my discussion group, we finally called it potential information. There's something that when photons hit that were reflected by the glass, hit my retina, etc., it triggers something. So it's potential information. It's not a glass before I attach the concept of glass to it. And it's not even separated. We fragment reality. We fragment reality according to our categories. Things are not separated, but that's how we consider the world. When we want to know what is this, we ask ourselves, what is it made of? We decompose it, we fragment it, and things out there cannot be fragmented. Fragmenting works well enough for closed system. I mean, they're more dynamically closed, but for open system, it doesn't work. And, to come back to this, we decide collectively what is good and bad.
Yeah.
But we can't decide what we want to, because if we decide that killing other people is good, we wouldn't be there very long to continue discussing. So we are limited by things out there on what we can decide is good or bad, but we decide. I don't know if Isaac, you've read the little book of Henri Poincaré, 1902. Its name I don't remember the exact name now, but it's concerning hypothesis.
Okay.
And
yeah, I don't think I've read it, but I'll add it to my, let me know what it is later and I'll add it to my list, but go ahead.
Yeah, okay. It's a small little book. I think it's less than 100 pages. And he shows very in detail what he calls conventionalism. That means everything we decide as being true is a convention between human beings. We agree together to consider it's true. And speaking for science, it's a common decision. And it's relatively easy to accept for physics or for biology. It's more difficult to accept for mathematics. But even for mathematics, it's true. The Pythagorean theorem is not a Platonic universal truth. It's the result of human beings accepting commonly that this is true. So good and bad, true and not true, depends on the structure of our own brain, and we have to create a society where what we choose to be good is profitable to most of the people and to the planet and to our future generations. But we have to do it. It's not a given truth what is good or bad. We have to decide it. It's our responsibility.
So maybe on this I can drill a little bit into a point that I think we only talked about briefly, maybe on Facebook. I don't think we recorded this idea, which is some of what you're talking about is pragmatic truth. But I'm wondering if you can at least for a little bit tell us about how pragmatic truth might relate to the development of being better people. do you know what I mean? Can you enlighten us on that, at least for a bit?
I don't know if I can say much. Perhaps in a few years, but I don't know if I can say much. But I think the basic morals are being written by human beings for years and years is it's already what is in most religions and
philosophies.
There's not much to add to this, but there's to add concerning the problem of focusing. Focusing is not something natural.
All right.
We didn't need to focus 500,000 years ago when we were in the savannah. We didn't need to focus. In fact, focusing was a disadvantage because if we were concentrated on one thing, we wouldn't see the predators coming on the other side. So the idea at that time was to focus, to be as short and as quick as possible, not to focus on one thing. So focusing came after language. The idea of focusing came after language, and but it's not natural. So now that we are getting more and more distractions, I think focusing is something that should be taught at school and I don't think it's only for efficiency or for business. I think it's for our personal accomplishment, for us to be better people, to be able to live not only our small limited life, but to be able, through reading and through literature and art and all sorts of human activity, to really consider something that goes beyond our small moment, small attention. So that's why I said to Christina that I was very, very supportive of what she's doing. Yeah.
And it's interesting how I think I may mention that already in the beginning of this conversation, that I've seen, if I look upon the different parts in the world, you could say simply the Western part and the Asian part, Eastern part, different parts in the world, different cultures, different religions, and to connect back to what Roland just spoke about, that probably creates different perceptions as well, because it's based upon different experiences in a way. But even though they are different, they have come into, from my understanding, into a similar way of expressing what focus is. And people initially may think it is only about efficiency and productivity. And this is why I want to bring in the deeper perspective, and also to combine, and this is interesting, I'll ask about the connection to the mathematic point of view here as well, but to combine the short-term focus with the long-term focus. Because if you know what it is to be very sharply focused, like we said, on one thing, consciously, it's not automatic attention, it's actually controlled attention. You choose what to focus on with your own power. If you know what that is like, because it is something that you can sense within yourself, if you know what that is, well, then you will also know what to search for. And the more often you can be in those moments, or put yourself into those moments with a clear decision and understanding of why you do it, you can probably more easily also move in the, so to say, right direction in the long term. So short-term focus and long-term focus, I believe, goes hand in hand. Or we could say perhaps that short-term focus is a prerequisite for long-term focus. And so I'm also thinking, when all these people are asking me and wondering, it could be quite emotional sometimes, where young minds are reaching out to me and they say, hey, dear madam, please help me, I've lost focus. And then they probably don't mean that they lost focus specifically for their exam or for their work. They lost focus in the terms of, who am I in this world? What am I supposed to do? So it goes deeper, but it may start with a short exam, the ability to be focused on one thing and to do that really, really well, and use your cognitive potential really, really well. But if people never get a chance to do that, I see a difficulty for people to be focused in a deeper way. And I think that affects society in quite many angles. And this also shows probably that we could ask the question, I'm also thinking now of someone back in history. I'm not sure I was born. I think I was. No, I was not born. 1969, there was a Swedish economist and politician and author. He wrote a book called, his name was Staffan Burenstam Linder. He wrote a book called The Restless Man. And so I'm wondering, if we were restless, in 1969, what are we so now? But so I have two questions in this, which are connected to mathematics. I think we have already maybe spoken around one of them, but it's we're speaking about to optimize the brain in a way. And if we say that focus may have been inherited for some part, the short-term automatic focus, but for the deeper and more long-term focus, it's new and it requires a high level of our way of thinking. If we optimize the brain, so to say, or try to do that in that sense, we also need to know what do we optimize it for. And I've been thinking a lot about this when it comes to machine learning and interaction between humans and machines, etc. And all these devices that want to optimize the brain and optimize concentration, but no one really is asking the question, for what? Because that's where the true focus is.
What are we optimizing our mental frameworks for? Yeah, Ronald, that's I'll just say briefly that question or one like it, because I talked to Hazel last night, who meant to join us, and like I said, probably we'll do that with her in the next few weeks. But it was similar to the type of question that she was interested in. So, like, yeah, to enlighten us, please.
Yeah. What strikes me is optimizing it by adding external devices, by adding machinery, or optimizing by being more yourself and discovering yourself in a deeper way. It's two different things. I think today people, when they speak about optimizing, it's always related to something, computers or something like that. But we must not forget that, first of all, we are biological entities, and biological entities are very different from machines, very different. And I'd like just to make one point precise. Whatever a human being can build is a machine. A tool, more complex or less complex, who goes from a simple spoon to a Macintosh computer or whatever, but it's a tool, and it's not, it's the machine, it's not organic. If it's a machine, what it means that it has gone for a digital stage. I mean, to build it, we had to use words, we had to design plans, apply rules, produce a blueprint. And once we had this blueprint, we gave it to the factory, who's a sort of printing machine, and they issued repetitively this computer, 100,000, 1 million copies. It's no problem. And each copy is the same as the other one. But it went through a digital phase. If nature produced something, there's no two trees who are exactly the same. It's organic, and the difference between a mechanism and an organism is a very deep difference. There's no way to be able to mechanically produce an organism. It can only be produced organically. So developing the brain by mechanical tools will develop one side of the brain, the digital side, the verbal side, the words. But what's deep inside, our biological millions of years who are behind us are not affected by this. We will not become a better human being or wiser or have a better philosophy of life or a better relationship with our husband or with our wife or with our children, because we have a tool to do that. A tool will make us compute faster, win a war, but it can't do anything for who we are deeply. And we must not forget that what we are deeply has nothing to do with the machine. We work completely different. We are in nature. There's nothing who is digital. Everything is purely analog. We falsely believe because we are so embedded in this culture of mechanistic culture. We believe that if a planet turns around the sun, it's because of Newton's laws. It's a stupid belief. Newton's laws is just our representation. The planet doesn't know the Newton laws and doesn't care about Newton's laws. It does for reasons that we don't know, that we cannot fragment. They are embedded in the whole universe. We can't fragment it. It's something who is beyond any law. And we believe that our description of reality is reality, but it's not true. It's purely a description. And being a verbal description, it's digitalized. It's not what things are. Whatever I say something is, it's a simple, a map is not the territory. It's two different things. And if I mix up both, then I'm completely confused. And I think that's happening very much today. To express what is deeply human, love, intelligence, you need an organic entity. You need a mental space. Hoping to create that with a machine is completely idiotic. It's a complete lack of color. Read Dostoevsky, read whoever you want to read, and you immediately realize that human beings cannot be predicted. A machine is a reversible entity. You can build it, rebuild it. It's reversible because in the thermodynamic sense, it's not an organism is not reversible. If it exchanges with the outside permanently. If you cut this exchange with the outside, you stop breathing or you stop eating, you will disappear and transform yourself immediately. Paul Davies had a good analogy. He said, there's a difference between a dead bird and a bird alive. If you take in your hand and you throw the dead bird, you can predict its trajectory. If you throw the living bird, you cannot predict its trajectory. That's a very good analogy. The matter who composes the bird is not the same thing as the bird itself, because the bird is alive. Something else happened in that. Yeah. Well,
go ahead, Christina.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I connect this to different challenges that humans today, but also in the future, humanity are facing. Some of them are very clear. How we have exploited our nature and telos, natural resources. That's the word I'm searching for. How we have exploited that, but we are also in a phase, and that will probably increase, where we are, in a way, through all these devices and through our wish to optimize things, and through our cognitive ability to create, as we say, machines and tools, we are probably facing a challenge which could be called as we are also exploiting our brains in a way. And I feel like asking the questions, how can we meet those future challenges if we do not also protect and reveal cognitive and emotional potential. And by adding that, not only cognitive potential, but also emotional potential, we directly tell ourselves that there is something that could be more deeper than emotional. It could be spiritual, it could be other words added to that as well. But to protect and reveal those potentials, I hope that can be something which will be given a bigger space in the collective conversations in media and everywhere. But I don't think it's so easy because we are stuck in the attention industry. And sometimes I say, hey, you know, wherever you are, wherever you go, someone or something wants your attention all the time. And that's sad, because if you jump upon that game, you will never really get or learn the ability, which is connected to focus, I believe, the ability to resist impulses, to say no, and to give yourself this, as we said before, this mental space or cognitive or emotional space where we are creative, where we think outside the box, as we say, where we dare to reflect further beyond what can be done by machines. And I think this is one of the reasons why I feel I need to build a global institution on reclaiming focus on a global scale, where this can be brought in. But connected to this, I come back to this discussion of good and bad. I don't know if it's connected, but never mind. We can just decide that we think so. And it could be from a mathematical perspective also interesting to hear. From a military perspective, we often talk about balance. And if people are in balance, people are quite good. You know, you need balance of sleep and activity as a person, but also on the collective arena and amongst people. If there's balance, there are less difficulties. So if balance has got to do with good and bad, and if balance can help people to move towards good, how does mathematics fit into that balance? As it might be, or is it measurable?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there are all sorts of mathematicians. There are completely crazy ones, completely unbalanced ones. Some of them end up in the how do you call it, asylum for crazy people,
The asylum.
Of course.
and very big ones. I mean, even Kurt Gödel's had many stays in the clinic for his mental health.
Right.
And Cantor died in, Cantor. It's the guy who defined infinity and who gave us a much better understanding of what infinity is. And he was facing a problem, and he was so obsessed by this problem. The problem is simple. It's is there an infinity between the one of natural numbers and real numbers? And that obsessed him so much that he ended up in an asylum, and he died there. And he was one of the greatest. So I can't say those people were especially balanced.
That's
a good point. Manage chaos, perhaps.
So, but there are also some mathematicians who are. But perhaps to be a really great mathematician, you have to have some kind of in balance.
Yeah.
Perhaps. Yeah. I mean, it's completely crazy to devote your life to something that you know in advance will be understood by very few people, will interest nobody, and so. But it's a good question. Yeah. The mathematics is different and special. It's not science, because it's purely mental. Science, you always have to do an experiment to sort of verify it before a hypothesis becomes recognized. It has always at least to make some prediction. And this prediction can be verified. Then we would accept it until it becomes wrong again, because we found a special case. So it evolves continuously. But in mathematics, you don't care about that. The only thing that matters is that it must be logical according to the axiom, the hypothesis you started with. So it's a purely mental game. There's nothing that relates it to what is outside, to nature. So it's very interesting, and most mathematicians are Platonists. They believe mathematics exists in a sort of ideal world. I was Platonist most of my life, but now I believe mathematics is simply a creation of the mental space, and it's our creation, and probably aliens would have most different mathematics, but we could agree. Okay. We could agree together on, and would have different mathematics because they would have different interests. Right. For instance, I don't know if you heard of the Jordan theorem. Jordan theorem is incredibly simple. It says if on the plane, if you have a closed curve, you have a closed curve gives you two regions, one inside and one outside. And you can't pass from one region to the other without crossing the line, crossing the curve. It's so simple and intuitively obvious for us. But to prove it, it's incredibly difficult. Incredibly.
Yeah. Okay.
So why is it so easy to have the intuition that it's true for us? Would it be so easy also for another type of mental space than ours? Probably not. So the mathematics that we do are related to what we found intuitive and normal and easy. It's if we had another brain, we would do other mathematics. That's what I believe today. But coming back to the Jordan theorem, there's something crazy in spending your whole life trying to prove Jordan theorem and not managing to do it. And I can tell you, I know I have some friends who have spent their whole life on Riemann hypothesis and have produced nothing. Wow. But they spend their life on that. Wow. So I think in some sense you must be obsessed, and obsessed is imbalanced.
But it keeps you away from at least it keeps you on one line, so to say, which may help distracted minds.
Yes.
to at least do something which is better than two crazy things which are not good for other persons. You don't do any harm, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not doing harm, and the idea of truth is there in mathematics.
Yeah.
There are true things out there. Finding true things out there is much more difficult. You have really to develop a lot of wisdom and listen to your heart, and yeah. I often wondered if that was not the main reason I chose to do mathematics. I wanted something who was really true.
Yeah.
Search for truth. So let me do this real quick. Is in just a moment we'll take a very brief break. If anybody needs to step aside for a smoke, a drink, or anything else, that's fine. And then we'll start to wrap up for maybe another however long we want. It could be 20 minutes, could be a bit more. But there's a question that I'll try to briefly pose now, and I might briefly pose in a minute. But at the same time, if you two want to chat or think or do anything else, that's fine. But so one thing that I don't think we have time to do directly today, because when I've talked to Dr. Ronald Cicurel here in the past, we talked a bit about some of his other books, or some of his most recently published books. So one is he published a short book about 10 years ago. We won't have time, I think, to get into that. Maybe if we can record in a few weeks or so. But the other is maybe a little bit of information on the book that he's been working on to publish hopefully soon, which has to do more with, well, his last book was on neuroscience and computation, roughly speaking. So his soon coming book, I believe, will be more on quantum physics theory, roughly speaking. So partly to clarify that, but what I would like to do, because I think it gets at what we've been talking about today, is there's this debate headed largely by Eric Weinstein, and the debate, roughly speaking, maybe I'll just send you guys the link later, but it's pretty easy to summarize. He's very against string theory, which is basically a subset of M theory, by the way. But basically his argument or his idea is that string theory has become too popular over the last 2 or 3 decades, roughly speaking, and it hasn't produced enough evidence to do more than anything than be fun, etc. So what he's saying is that string theory, and he's talked about this on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I think his own podcast a number of times, but that string theory has taken too many of the mathematicians and too many of the quantum theorists and those type of minds, when they should be looking into other things, using things like classical mechanics, Newtonian mechanics. At least that's his opinion. And that may relate to Christina's background a little bit, in terms of how that might look from a military's perspective or athletic perspective. But it's the idea of how do we, because when we got into this question a little bit a few minutes ago, we talked about technology and important things like that, but it was what I'm thinking is a good way to sort of wind down, is the question of how do we deal with the human resources of our mental capacity, things like academia, even the military, and optimize that collective resources of the mental spaces, as Cicurel, Dr. Ronald Cicurel might call it. So ponder that for maybe a couple minutes. Maybe when I get back in just a minute, I might reiterate it a bit more succinctly, and then we'll try to wind down. So yeah, like 2-minute break, or at least for me. But one other thing that I don't know if we'll have enough time to go on. It might depend on everyone's energy level and things like that. But I think we talked a little bit on Facebook, or at least noticed each other's posts on Facebook about how a lot of people think programs like ChatGPT are now conscious or sentient. And I know you don't really believe that exactly. I mean, I know that kind of gets into the idea of like what is intelligence versus what is mind, etc. So I don't know if we'll have time to get into that, maybe just briefly in closing. But okay, now that we're all back here, so let me see if I can try to briefly reiterate the question I sort of posed a couple minutes ago, and see if we can get into it. I might sort of briefly pose it to Christina first, and then that'll give it's kind of funny too, as I've been thinking about this, because what's funny is, you know, we know our minds are at the very least dual processing, because we have to be paying attention to a conversation, for example, like this one, but at the same time, sometimes I notice myself and Christina will take notes for later, and sometimes do other things. So it's like, and you know, sometimes it's even more like get drinks, get snacks, etc., etc. You gotta process sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 things, and yeah, so you got your water so you don't exhaust your throat or anything else. But so to reiterate the question, what's interesting actually, like I mentioned earlier, I've met Christina just now through our mutual friend Hazel, who we know at least a little bit through our mutual friends, etc. Anyway, the two of you now happen to be, I don't know if you'd call it Central Europe or something, not exactly Western Europe and not exactly Eastern Europe. But the reason that's a little bit pivotal to the question that I'm trying to pose as we start to wind down, at least, is, you know, there's still a lot of conflict in Eastern Europe, but particularly between Russia, Ukraine, and that whole region. And of course, Russia's connected in some way, at least ideologically, to places like China, who has a bigger geopolitical influence. I'm not sure if we can get into all this, but that is to say that, you know, sometimes we might think of these questions very straightforwardly, that like I was trying to pose a few minutes ago, of how do we you know, narrow our human cognitive resources for the greater good, some might say. And I know that sometimes that's a little bit cliche to say things like the greater good, but for the sake of this conversation, I think you know what I mean. And but the reason I put in that context too is because sometimes that can seem trivial, but sometimes it can mean the difference between, you know, destroying a country or not, or you know, if I'm of course reminded of the Manhattan Project. There's actually a movie coming out this summer here in the next few weeks on Oppenheimer, which I'm sure is interesting to the two of you, by Christopher Nolan. Anyway, so the question is, like I was saying a little bit ago, Eric Weinstein is a bit concerned that too much of the mathematical minds, at least, the quantum theorists, are focused too much on string theory, and that doesn't really do anything practically, at least in his mind, or at least not enough. And so the question, maybe I'll start with Christina, is like, and she has a bit of a military background, that's why I put it in that context, is how do you think we can focus our attention, not just individually, but also collectively? Again, apologize if it's a bit cliche, but for something like the greater good. So yeah, go ahead, Christina, if you don't mind.
I wish I had a very clear response.
Yeah.
I think if there was a clear response, I think the world would have looked differently. So that means that it's complex. It means that it's easy now to think that the problems that we see around us right now are the ones that are developing the further problems and stopping us from being able to develop as humans towards the greater good. But I think we must not forget that there is a long history that has developed people's minds, and not only people's minds, but collective minds. Military forces has been needed from many perspectives to create balance, like we said before. We wish that this was not perhaps necessary, but it has been necessary from the perspectives that we can look upon it. And I think that those so deeply fundamental developed I don't know if I should call them resources or understandings or institutions, has of course affected our minds as well, not only to the good, but again, I think there has been a willpower of doing good. I think countries in their deeper values, if we can find them within the space of a country, also want to do good. Everyone wants to do good in a way, most of us. But there's a lot back in history that now pops up and always will pops up. And I think the important thing, and one thing that we can do, besides the fact that we need to understand that there is a lot of things which are so complex that we don't have a simple response to it. Because if we try to treat those issues with simple responses or simple solutions, we will fail. But one thing we probably can do is to help ourselves to stop having those problems increasing. And I think what goes on internet in different echo chambers should in some way or another be more stopped. The development of there is a fragmentation around seen a lot on internet, a lot of the fake news, a lot of, like I said before, these echo chambers where bad things can be developed, and depolarization is increasing as well. And so one can ask the question, why is this happening? We can understand it from a technical point of view, from an internet point of view, so to say. But I think also if we come back to find some kind of understanding through, you said, how do we pay attention towards the greater good? I think if I combine what I just said now to the lack of attention that I see out in the world, the lack of focus, and I go deeper again, I reflect upon this, that when people are asking me for help for wanting to be more focused, and like I said before, they are afraid sometimes of losing themselves, or they are afraid of being mediocre. What they need and what they want is attention from others. Every person needs to be seen, to be heard, to be respected, to be understood, to not feel completely lonely. People need to be seen, to be heard. And so we have all these opportunities out on the internet, on the different social media, that's help, in brackets, people to seek for attention. And I think people seek for attention on the internet desperately. And when they do that, they jump very easily upon things that are not developing them in the right way, or they are fed with a large amount of irrelevance. And if we look upon the memory in the brain, the different kinds of memories, but if you put it like this, that it's only, there is this expression, I don't know who have said it, maybe it was me, probably not. Probably I just remember what someone else has said. But what we feed our presence becomes our past. And it's only from our past that we can create perceptions of the future. And people need to be able to create perceptions of the future where they put themselves in the future, and when they see something good. People need hope. And if they are only seeking for attention, and what they get is a large amount of fake news and irrelevance and bad things, we stop helping people to get hope. And I think that is something we could do more about, without touching the history of why things are looking the way they are. Do you see what I mean?
I do. So yeah, let me again try to briefly pose this question to Dr. Ronald Cicurel, our returning guest here. Yeah, I mean, because I feel like this kind of ties again to my question that I posed in passing earlier about pragmatic truth. You know, we may not know the ultimate truth of what's ultimately good or ultimately the greater good, but we may have some consensus, like you know, we're just kind of coming out of a pandemic here, and it was kind of an educational process, you might say, for humanity to say, like, okay, what was the best way to go through that, and the less than ideal way to go through that, I know is still being discussed a lot in a lot of circles and discussion groups. So and without complicating it too much, I know language has a lot to do with it, and that can be dealing with language barriers, and it can also do with the ability to have civil discourse, which isn't always as easy as it might sound. So the question is, yeah, how do we focus our attention a bit on the individual level and on the societal level to have the better result? Perhaps pragmatically, you can at least try to get at this difficult question as we start to wind down our discussion for the day. I know it's after 10 o'clock, almost 11 o'clock where you guys are at in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah. It is with no doubt a very difficult question. And, I don't think we are making. We've made a lot of progress since the old times, since the Greeks and the Romans, and I think technology, social media has amplified the certain traits of our brain in a way who's not necessarily positive. Aristotle was trying to find a way to fight against the sophists who were preaching untruths or lies only to make money or gain power. And that's how he invented logic. He thought that by structuring the language in a way where it would be obvious when you say something who's not true, well, he failed. Another one who had the same kind of idea was Leibniz. Leibniz, who was confronted to all those wars in Europe at that time, and had the example of mathematics. He thought that by building a language on the model of how mathematics and algebra had just reached Europe at that time, on the way algebra was done, we could simply, when a disagreement was there, sit around the table and sort of compute or calculate what was good and what was bad. And obviously he failed. He failed without completely failing, because he invented the binary system and he built the first computer,
Yeah.
who's still in exhibition. I don't know if it's in Munich or Frankfurt, but Leibniz computer was there, and it was a computer capable to do the 4 mathematical operations, and it was quite an advanced machinery for that time. But he failed in his main goal. He wanted a sort of, how do you say in English, an Aryan Fred who could guide you when you speak towards truth and understanding. And he couldn't do that. And
Wow.
but that was his dream since he was young.
It was like theoretically, at least, the first Chat GPT in a way, but I don't know if that's getting too deep for this part of the conversation.
No. Your remark is very interesting, Isaac.
Yeah,
Just to stay on this ChatGPT thing.
sure.
I don't know if you read Borges, the Library of Babel.
I think that's on my list, but I haven't gotten to it yet. Tell us about it.
It's a small novel, and I'm going to summarize it quickly for you.
Sure.
It's a library. It's a huge library. In this library, there are books of 600 pages with, let's say, 300 characters per page. And there are all the possible books written by a combination of letters who fit in this format. So it's a huge library, but a finite library.
Yeah.
And that's the idea of the Library of Babel. And so in this library, you have all the works of Shakespeare. Obviously, they are there.
Right.
You have the book I wrote last year. It's obviously in there. And they're all, and they're all the books you will write in the next 10 years, Isaac.
Sure.
There's a
Christina's book, of course.
All your teaching, Christina.
Sure.
There's everything is in the library. So if we want to have some knowledge, we just have to go to the library and select the physics textbooks of year 3500, and just read that book, and we know all the future, because it's one of the books of the library. And the library is very simple. In fact, it's in your computer, because you simply write the program, the small little one-line program, print all combinations of letter under the following format, and your printer will spit out the whole Borges library. So everything is already there.
Amazing.
The problem, so Borges, he didn't speak about what I'm saying now, but in one way, Borges library solves everything. But the difficulty is, how do you find the right book? Because you have you have the whole work of Shakespeare written by Christina, also.
Yeah, I see.
And you have King Lear, who's a romantic hero, or you can have anything in this stuff. So how to spot out the right book? And in fact, there's a mathematical theorem who says there's no way of doing it. You can't in advance know what the right book will be. But and that's very interesting, because let's say you have the right book, but to be sure and it's a book written in the year 3500, and it's the right book. For you to be sure that it's the right book, you have to have the knowledge of year 3490. If no, you couldn't understand the book.
Mm.
So knowledge is something who comes like a ladder. You have to know you have to climb step by step. You can't jump. You can't overcome. If an alien came here and gave us a book who says everything, we would have the book, we could read it, but we couldn't understand it. To understand things, you have to go step by step. There's no other way to do it. And that's exactly the problem of ChatGPT. It can align a lot of things one after the other, but it cannot tell you if it's true or not true.
Right.
So to come back to the
question,
how to make sure that we are on a good line.
Yeah.
I think that the main thing is to start by oneself. You have to start by yourself.
Well, that's a good point.
You have to start. Well, it's Socrates. You have to start asking yourself a lot of questions on who you are, what you want to be, how do you see yourself, how you like to be treated. Are you treating the people around you the way you would like to be treated? And perhaps it would spread out. But I'm not very confident, because we are not going in this direction for the time being. We are going, more people are connected on social media, more they are distant and lonely, and they are looking for a solution in the wrong direction. So I'm not very optimistic. I'm optimistic on the long term, but it might take a lot of catastrophe before we get to a point where we can avoid wars and normally, when you talk to a human being in a good context, you can agree. He can be nice to you. You can be nice to him, and you can help each other. You can create together. You can enjoy your time together. But at the moment where he represents another group, and you represent another group, you're not free of your own moment. You're caught in a network of. It becomes really complicated.
Yeah, how do you say that? As again, it might sound a bit cliche, but it's hard to get out of our prejudices. And even if we start to get out of our prejudices, it's intriguingly easy, I'm finding, especially with things like social media, like you mentioned a minute ago, to fall into echo chambers that just reinforce our prejudices.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe we'll try to maybe wrap up towards the top of the hour, give or take. But yeah, let me just do you have anything you want to say on that Dr. Cicurel? Looks like you might.
Yeah, no, I would like to say that
sure.
There are many people of goodwill, and I feel it as a necessity, at least, to group those people of goodwill because what is hurting us is the system we've put in place. For one reason or another, the system has put on the top of the hierarchy stupid and bad politicians who don't have this balance Christina was speaking about, who don't have this understanding, who have their own goals and their own agendas. And why have we done such a stupidity? Why have we done that? How is it that we haven't been able to create a system where at least the basic needs of everybody are fulfilled? I don't know how we got there, or we've always been there. I don't know. But because if we don't get out of this, stupid competition will remain there. So we won't solve the problem without confronting the stupidity of our systems.
Yeah,
That's a great line there. We won't solve the problem without confronting the stupidity of our systems.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited because I believe in human beings, and I believe
Right.
that even if we are three person now around the table, that might be enough to change a lot of things. If
Right.
and even if we know in advance that it's not enough and that we will not succeed, we have to do it.
I like that. Yeah, Christina, let's start to wrap up with your just response or thoughts or anything you have on that, and then maybe just briefly tell us a little bit more about yourself in closing, because the part that may get published may not include a lot of those specifics, but yeah, just any closing thoughts and anything else about you, and maybe mention your website or anything like that, and then we'll probably have Ronald do the same and maybe talk a little bit about his books as we wrap up in the next 10 or 15 minutes.
Well, I would also like to conclude with similar thoughts, which
Sure.
is good. Then we have an echo chamber here, but at least for the good, because I also believe that we can do a lot as collective powers. I think role models are important, and to refer to what you said now, Isaac, people call me, sometimes the focus icon or the focus goddess, or very funny and fine expressions like that. And there was a time where I kind of stepped back from that, when I said to myself, or perhaps also to others, that no, I shouldn't be called that, or who am I to have those words? I am, just an ordinary person. And then after some reflections, of course, I realized that, everyone is an ordinary person, everyone. But it comes back to this, what can you do as an individual? And one thing we can do is to strengthen, I believe, our inner core, our inner core values, and our connections to, like we said, who we are and what we can do. And to be humble, but also to create stronger self-esteem, not from the superficiality, perhaps out on internet, but through true conversations, and through doing good, not in the sense of only being better at our work or peak performing even more, but also to act in a way that we wish humans should act. And the more people who do good things, the more people we will also be able to resist all those impulses that perhaps wants us to not do good, or that brings us into the wrong echo chambers, so to say. So I want to bring hope. I'm also positive. I believe also in the human being a lot. I believe in myself. I know what I can do. I know I'm already a role model, and I will continue to be a role model. If that is a role model for being focused, that's very good. The more people who can learn to respect their own attention and their own focus, then the better we can together learn to resist impulses and stay on target, in the sense of focusing on what's good. So I think there are a lot of positive things that are that are able to catch. But we cannot do it alone. And we need to support ourselves and the other ones around us. So I wish us to move from a collective and superficial blur to a united focus where depth, creativity, and I would say sharpness and long-term thinking has a greater place.
Yeah, that's good. So I'm going to mention a couple things real quick. One, I don't know if you've read any of the Cal Newport books. This isn't in focus very well. Anyway, we'll talk about this perhaps another time. I'll just say that I've read some books on focus. Some of them I have right here with me. Some of them get moved around between where I'm at and lending to friends, etc. So we'll probably get, yeah, you've got stacks of books too, I'm sure. And
I don't have mine here.
oh yeah, probably lend it out somewhere. But I'll just say, yeah, in a future discussion, we'll probably get more in depth in some of these issues that you just mentioned. And again, sort of as a closing, I don't know why I put this blur thing. Anyway, as Dr. Cicurel's book that I talked about before, Brain Centric, how our mental space builds our realities, is interesting because it's called Volume 1, The Mental Space.
Yeah.
Sort of implying like something we talked about a little bit last time when I had a different wall behind me with a Dune poster, that, you know, that was Dune Part 1. Dune Part 2 is coming out later this year. Similarly, can you tell us anything, Dr. Cicurel, about your other books, in particular the one that you're still in the making, which will probably be Brain Centric Volume 2, and anything else that you're working on, your discussion group or anything else, and then we can again wrap up here a little bit.
Brain Centric Volume 2. In fact, there was one Brain Centric at the beginning. One.
Oh yeah.
I even have it here.
Oh, really? Exciting.
It is.
Wow, there it is. The double Brain Centric.
It's 700 pages. So I decided that I would cut it in 2 parts.
Right. This one's a little over 300 pages, Volume 1.
Yeah, because what I wanted to do, and in fact, it was the initial idea, was to have a sort of broad explanation of what BrainSec approach was, and then apply it to our understanding, especially of quantum physics, because there are so many so-called interpretations of quantum physics. The equations are the same for everybody, but the interpretation of what our world is be completely different. So I wanted to apply brain centric to quantum physics and see how you interpret how you interpret the basic quantum physics experiment, Wigner or Wheeler or even Jung and the double slit. How do you interpret them via the brain-centric approach?
Right.
In fact, physics looks for explanation of something who's outside by something else who's outside. When I say outside, I mean outside of our brain, of our mental space.
Yeah.
It causes cause can be local, non-local in quantum physics. There's non-locality, but it's always outside of our brain. Knowing that our brain works mainly by expectations.
Mm.
We know things that we expect to know.
Right.
And knowing that any particle has only an existence for its mathematical definition. It has no observable existence. Nobody has ever seen a photon or an electron.
Right.
It's unseeable.
Right.
Obviously, in common language, they speak about electrons and neutrons and quarks like if they were things who really existed.
Right.
But we don't know. They surely don't exist.
It's like the wind. We see the effect, but we don't really see the wind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The new definition of existence in physics is to say something exists if it's useful to suppose it exists.
Right. I
So,
believe in the wind.
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and knowing that our brain works only by expectations, we can only what part of the explanation is from inside our brain and not so in the second part of the book I had described most elements of quantum physics like randomness, and obviously randomness cannot exist out there. There's no randomness out there. Only randomness is built in our randomness, like superposition, and most of the quantum physics experiments interpreted in brain-centric terms.
Right.
But then I noticed that I couldn't put both things in one book because for somebody who had no idea of or little idea of quantum physics, it would need a huge introduction who would discourage people who know about quantum physics. So I decided to separate it into two volumes, and the volume 2 is written, but I don't like it as it is. So I haven't yet published it, and I don't know if I will ever publish it. I hope I will, but I'm not sure.
I hope that at least some people can read it, if nothing else, because it's interesting that like, okay, we met through a another mutual friend in a quantum a discussion book on Clubhouse and other social media that is largely on this subject of quantum physics theory and some other things, but largely that. And what I found interesting, a lot of my curiosity actually came from at about that time I was really getting into the subject that we spoke on even for just a few minutes, I think in another room, which is sometimes called synchronicity. Another deep question having to do with determinism or indeterminism, etc. But so I was on my own curiosity was the curiosity of, is synchronicity a delusional phenomena or a true phenomena?
Yes.
Well, it looks like you have something to say on that. So do you want to say anything on that, Dr. Cicurel?
What I never told you that is when I was young, when I was about 30 years old, I did 3 years of psychoanalysis with the direct student of Carl Gustav Jung.
I think you mentioned that just briefly when we were in another room, but tell me more.
No, so I think it must have influenced me quite a lot, especially the question of synchronicity, but unconscious collective and archetypes, and so I think it impressed me, and but the question of the nature of reality, I think even when I was very young, I always thought we were told stories. That it's not like that. Our descriptions are not what is out there.
Right.
It cannot be. And I was always looking for a failure in the description of how things happened. And um, uh, I think the first thing that shocked me is that reading, I don't know if you know Alfred Korzybski.
Just a little bit, but yeah, tell us more.
In 1933, he wrote a book whose title was General Semantics, an introduction to non-Aristotelian systems.
Wow.
No, the title was Is Science and Sanity?
Oh, right.
An introduction to non-Aristotelian systems. Yeah.
Okay.
And he studied quite carefully how perception functioned,
Right.
and how the path that goes from the object to the brain to the word who denominates the object. And he's famous because of the expression the map is not the territory.
Oh, right.
And he's famous also because not Kandinsky, Magritte made a painting entitled "This Is Not a Pipe."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen
It
this.
looks like a pipe, but it's a painting of a pipe, supposedly.
Whatever you say it is not. It cannot be, because what you say is a word, and the thing is not a word. So
It's a symbol.
he had quite intelligent analysis of this, but it was in 1933. So at that time, we didn't know how perception worked. We didn't know that perception works only by expectation. There's no way for perception to see reality. And that became a crisis in neuroscience around 1960s because of what they named the binding problem.
Oh, right. Yeah.
How is it that signals who come from the ears, from the eyes, and follow different nerve paths and never come simultaneously at the right place? You can bind this up into an intelligent and useful image. And they had nobody had any explanation for that until slowly the idea that the perception was initiated inside the brain and went toward outside, and you got confirmation of what you already thought. Or if you didn't have confirmation, you had surprise, or you suppressed what you saw that didn't fit in your picture. So knowing this and having studied with Miguel for a long time,
Miguel Nicolelis,
those questions of perception, I really wondered how we were doing in quantum physics. If not that I questioned the questions, but I questioned the interpretation. And interpretations are very important because they guide us toward the future. So
yeah, maybe I can try to do this, which is that I think what a lot of you're getting at is how people like tennis players, for example, and highly achieving tennis players and highly achieving musicians. I don't know as much about sharpshooters, whether that's archers or rifle people, but they are like Dr. Ronald Cicurel was just saying, able to achieve at that high level because that they have sort of almost perfected their expectation in a very specific area.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
No, the most remarkable is ping pong players.
Oh, right. Yeah, you mentioned that you play.
They have to know long time before the adversary touches the ball where the ball is going to come. If no,
Right.
there's
It's
no.
even faster than tennis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. It's incredible.
Yeah, Christina, go ahead. I can tell that you you have something
Yeah,
to
well,
say.
it's to give a view from the actually what we think is the reality. I remember
Right.
from the shooting, we can think about this. But compare precision shooting, what I did to ping pong players. I would say ping pong players win,
Wow.
as Dr. Ronald explains. But I can remember from being being on the lane, being nervous, having all these negative
Right.
thoughts and
Right.
wonderings and worryings, being afraid actually of hitting the target,
Right.
and then after a while having this kind of developed capability to what we call zoom in, where it's actually more about not being disturbed by all distractions and to choose one single thought that exists, almost like not a thought at all, but let's say one single thought. So then there's this mental capability which is there, a good opportunity for then hit the target in the center. But then we have the wind, and there are I don't know what you call that in English, but small flags out on the range, on the range, so that you could see how the wind was blowing.
Oh, right. Okay.
And this was sometimes extremely difficult. The 10 was only 10.4 millimeters, and it's 50 meters away. It actually was impossible in a way to even hit the target sometimes, But then you find a space where I could definitely know the difference from also, the margins within the 10, the margins within a millimeter from a distance of 50 meters.
Wow.
And then the wind, it took back to what we spoke about before, how it takes a long time, sometimes year, to develop a skill. And I didn't even know what to develop. There could be a lot of people, like we spoke about ChatGPT now, telling me, a coach telling me, you should do this, you should move this hand, you should have this ammunition, etc. And all that information. The best thing I could do was to resist and to not care about all that information, but to just practice and to see. And then after some years, I could foresee that the wind was coming, but the flags were not moving. How could I know? How could I know where the wind was coming? Because you said before, Isaac, we can't see the wind. And I was thinking, no, we can't really, but somehow
Not
we
visually
can sense
anyway.
it in advance. Yes. And that's similar. And it's amazing.
It's amazing.
And I think it gives comfort to a person, because it's a way to it create some kind of calmness.
Stillness.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to find the stillness to achieve to achieve the certain things that very few have. Well, let me do this. Go ahead, Dr. Cicurel. Go ahead.
No, I found it also very interesting. We are in a century of imitation and makeup and pretend to be what you're not, and
willful delusion, we might call it willful delusion.
Yeah. And I think this is when you were speaking, how can we do the good? I think this is the wrong track. we just have to accept ourselves
Mm.
as we are, and not like if you manage to get I don't know, to get a job because you pretended you are,
Yeah.
because ChatGPT write you a marvelous
CV.
CV, etc. Will you be happy in this job? Will you be able to do what you pretended you were?
Yeah.
All this is complete cheating. It's not the right direction, and it leads. It seems stupid, but this leads to wars. This
Yeah.
leads
Yeah.
when it blows up and it reaches
Yeah.
those levels, it leads to wars, and yeah. Well, yeah, there would be a lot of things to say on expectation and
Yeah.
how perception works and how it acts in sports.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in collective sports also, where
Oh, yeah, team sports.
Miguel, who's Brazilian, is training the Palmeiras football club.
Oh yeah. Soccer, as us say it in across the pond, but yeah.
Because they have to coordinate without knowing what the other one will do. So they have to synchronize their brains in a certain way. And synchronization is a very universal mechanism. And when you manage to train synchronization with a group, you create something very powerful. You create a sort of meta thinking.
Well, yeah, and in that example, they have to willfully create a projected delusion, which is harder to do on the team level. It's one thing to do as like maybe a boxer or ping pong player or tennis player, but on a team level, that's transcendent. Yeah.
Like singing, the singing.
Yeah. Yes,
In
group
groups.
singing. Yeah. True. Yeah. So yeah, let's do this. I know it's been about a couple hours and it's after 11 where you guys are at in Europe. So let's just get some very brief closing thoughts from each of you, and then we'll wrap up, and I'm sure talk again in the coming weeks and months, at least once more, if not more than once. So yeah, Christina, succinctly, let's just any closing thoughts from you, and then we'll wrap here in just a couple minutes.
What I would like to say is, of course, thank you for these hours.
Yeah, thank you.
I was spontaneously invited by Hazel, who's not here, and I didn't know so much actually about the conversation or about you. Of course, I read about you, etc., but that's all I have. And again, that's nothing compared to the reality. And I believe also that now we meet only through a screen. I think if we would meet in the very real world as well, we would have this collective enthusiasm and a collective willpower of doing good, and to think and to combine these two interesting paths, which are or 3 or 4 or 5 different paths: philosophy, mathematics, precision shooting, peak performance, cognitive spaces, focus and concentration, and how all this can move ourselves in a better direction. It is motivating me a lot to speak to you, and thank you for being on air.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, Dr. Cicurel, it's been a pleasure again. And like I said, by the way, I will try to be recording more, especially this summer. And hopefully, if things go according to plan, I'll visit Europe in about a year. So maybe we can do something like a little get together for some like-minded individuals. Yeah. But yeah, do you have any closing thoughts, and then we'll wrap up and hopefully talk in the future.
No, I must thank you for having organized this encounter, and especially thank you and Hazel for letting me meet Christina. It was Yeah, a big pleasure and yeah, big pleasure. And I would say it's an honor to be able to speak to you both and to exchange our ideas. And yeah, so thank you to both of you. And
All right. I really appreciate that. And I'll just say stay tuned, and I'll be in touch with both of you in terms of links to this recording and then the edited one that'll come out in the next couple weeks or so. And yeah, it was again my pleasure. And again, I just really appreciate it. And I'll see you two in the future. All right, thanks.
Thank you a lot.